Om Jnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Nena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vansha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Nitai Namineche Namirhate Sharamulye Namdite Chere Nitai Namineche Namirhate Sharamulye Namdite Chere Hare Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Good morning, everyone. It's okay to say good morning. Something special about getting together in the morning at a different place, different context, look at things in a fresh way. And everything is fresh, always new, but there's a way that I start looking at the world in a way that's consistent with the way I feel about the world. And then I can become bored or think that my life isn't worth much and forget the great gifts that we have. Krishna's always there within our hearts, and he's our well-wisher. He's a suhrit, always ready to assist us. Not only that, we are indestructible, parts and parcels of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That in and of itself is a great revelation. When I had first read the Bhagavad Gita and came to the second chapter and saw that, as Krishna says, you can't be killed, can't be cut, it goes into details just to make sure we understand it, that we're categorically different from the body. It was a great relief to me. I thought in and of itself, that solves most of the problems that I was worrying about. And it's easy to forget that and settle into a bodily or mental conception of life and then start worrying again about everything. So we're on this path given to us by the Sri Guru Parampara, and as I was saying yesterday, most mercifully administered and conceived by His Divine Grace, Śrīla Prabhupāda. He was so merciful, he thought, to include everybody in the world. Of course, that's the intention of Kṛṣṇa, and certainly of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Śrīla Prabhupāda's predecessors, Śrīla Bhaktivinoda, Śrīla Bhaktisiddhanta, had this desire and urge to see that everyone in the world have an opportunity to take to this exhilarating path of devotional service. And he made it possible. And now the world's open for business. Great marketing ploy by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda. Marketing means quantitative and qualitative reasoning, using our intelligence and practical means, but to expand Krishna consciousness. That ought to keep us busy for a while. Marketing's hard. It means you always have to be on target and realigning yourself with purpose. And similarly, we also have to struggle because we're, as Krishna says, mamai vamsho jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana manakshastan indriyani prakritistani karshati. You're parts and parcels, but you're struggling with the mind, which is affected by the modes of nature. Grappling hard. Grappling is more well known nowadays due to MMA. So, one of the milestones in Krishna consciousness, which has been shown to us by Śrīla Vishwanatha Cakravartī Thākura, Śrīla Rūpa Goswāmī, and others, is the platform of steadiness. They're called nishtha. And interestingly, this shta word, nishtha, is cognated in English with the word stand. Sanskrit tishtati means that you're able to stand. So one of the suggestions for moving forward in Krishna consciousness, which to me sounds practical and reasonable, is from Śrīla Śrīdhara Svāmī, who writes in his commentary to Tatenu Kampam Samikshamano Punjane Bhatmakritam Vipakam, that we should always be expectant of Krishna's mercy. This is one of the ways to live and see the world, that Krishna is trying to give me mercy at every step. And I should be open to that. Just be really open to the fact that Krishna's giving mercy. And then interpret everything in that way. We're free to interpret, right? Say yes. Yeah, everyone's free to interpret. Somebody look up the word. If you interpret the world according to the Srimad Bhagavatam, or to Brahma himself, says look at it as being the mercy of Krishna, and for it's kind of medicine so that we can improve ourselves. And then, of course, the rest of the verse says that if you're able to do this, if you make this little adjustment in your life, then you'll be eligible for what? SATs, MCATs. The MCATs, you got to get, what is it? What's the high score? Where's, huh? No, that's the SATs, 1600. Yeah, Tulsi just took the MCATs. What do you have to get? 528's the highest? Okay, she was pretty close. I mean, in her score. There's all these ways that we can, judge how we're doing. But Brahma and the Srimad Bhagavatam says you can judge how you're doing by how you're able to make this adjustment of your interpretation of what's happening in the world, to say that this is for my betterment. Somehow take every insult, every reversal. Hope I'm not making anybody feel queasy too early in the morning. Every windfall that comes, whatever comes as an opportunity to see Krishna's hand and to say, in what way is he bringing me closer to full dependence on him? So Brahma says, Sadaya Bhak, that if you're able to do this, as you do it, even as you attempt to do it, then you make yourself eligible for the 528. Did you say 528? The 1600? 1600, that's the SATs. Balaram, where's Balaram? 1600, right? He was pretty close, I think, to 1600, if you didn't do 1700. Or the 528, 1600. For the Vaishnav, the 1600 and the 528 is tatenu kampam susamikshamano. He's like, how did I do? I got about a 10 out of 1,600 on that one. I melted down. I blamed everybody else. I said, I'm not worthy and I can't do this, and I quit. And one looked at a screen somewhere in the corner and gave up. But if we can develop spiritual strength and say, let me try this, let me adjust my attitude and accept Krishna's mercy, whichever way it comes. What a dignified thing to do. What an attractive thing to do. You see a human being in adverse situations who's able to adjust and say, it's okay, I'm going to move on. Not that we become a doormat, but we also treat the situation simultaneously as Krishna's mercy, and we also deal with it in appropriate ways. As you've heard me say hundreds, if not thousands of times, methodically but dispassionately. As Krishna recommends throughout the Bhagavad Gita, to deal with things dispassionately but methodically. You have to do your duty, do it, but don't freak out. So, if we're able to do that, then we're eligible, and we feel eligible for special mercy. And it's not just a free ride back to Godhead, it's also to be able to live in the world in a way in which we feel effective. We're able to take the best out of every situation. We're able to deal with others in a way that treats them with dignity, no matter what position they're in at the present time, because they're all souls. Yasmin sarvani bhutani atmai vadbhut vijnanataha tatrako mohakashoka ekabam anupashita. For somebody who sees like that, not artificially, but because they're adjusting their own vision and they're seeing themselves as objects of Krishna's mercy, then they're able to see it in others also. And there's no lamentation. There's no hatred for others. What's the word?
Interpret is a verb which can mean explain the meaning of, information, words, or actions. And it can also mean translate orally or into sign language the words of a person speaking a different language. Interpret, understand, or explain the meaning of information, words, or actions.
Where does it come from?
Comes from Latin interpres, which means agent, translator. And
Translator.
Translator.
That's pretty good. If something happens, it's like, let me translate that for you. It's a message from God. I never looked at it that way. That we have to do that for ourselves, learn to translate everything as a message from God. And if we can do that, then we're eligible to inherit the kingdom of God. It's not just some pithy saying you inherit the kingdom of God. You actually feel connected constantly because you're interpreting whatever's happening as God speaking to me through that. It's Krishna's mercy. He's giving me something special to take into my heart to become a better person. So that's something. And in the purport, Śrīla Śrīdhara Svāmī, the great commentator from or of antiquity. From antiquity. Editors? From antiquity. Thank you. Anupam. What? Could be both. Let's haggle about this. He says something that's just so relatable and so enlivening. And it's included in the first part of the purport that explains the commentaries of the great ācāryas, both Śrīla Śrīdhara Svāmī and Śrīla Vishwanatha Cakravartī Thākura. He gives this analogy. He said, the son of a rich man has a primary duty in life. And that's to stay alive. That's very practical, right? What are you doing? Staying alive. Why? Because he'll inherit the wealth. And similarly, he says, the devotee has a singular duty: stay alive in Krishna consciousness, somehow or other. This is also the suggestion of Śrīla Rūpa Goswāmī, who says, yena, tena, prakāreṇa, manaḥ kṛṣṇa niveśayet. Or as some people say, yena, tena, prakāreṇa, manaḥ kṛṣṇa niveśayet. It means somehow or other, somehow or other. This is from our main ācārya. He says, somehow or other, if you figure it out. I love Prabhupada also says in a purport, when he's talking about how devotees should live in the world because you have to make a livelihood. He says, somehow, he says, be inventive. Just figure out a way. It's not that important what you do, just as long as you can survive somehow or other. Be inventive. And so he says, somehow or other, stay alive in Krishna consciousness. And if I can consider this, rather than thinking that I have to be stellar in all my activities, best in everything, and I have to show up in such a way that everyone sees that I'm faultless. If we simply accept this basic principle of staying alive, I personally find it encouraging. What do you think? So I thought I'd just mention a few points about staying alive, the ways that I stay alive, or try to. Habudubu. Habudubu means, in Bengali, as you well know, just saying if somebody doesn't know, sound of drowning. Habudubu. Everyone say 3 times. It's bubbles. On top of everything, someone goes, you forgot to pay for the insurance and the car just got hit and her son ran away, and the habudubu. There's a practical, how do you stay alive when what you expected didn't happen, or something that is so disturbing to the mind, somebody criticizes you, that hurts, right? Out of nowhere, and suddenly you're walking along, singing a song, and next thing you're like, oh my God, maybe I'm doing it all wrong. So first is, and on my list, is to attend to the basics. I like that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in teaching Sanatana Goswami, listed the 64 items of devotional service, and then he said, okay, 5 out of these. If you take these 5, and he emphasized it so much, he said, even if you don't have faith in them, don't worry. And even if you only have a tiny bit of contact with these 5, you're still going to stay alive. And those 5, chant Hare Krishna. That comes in at the top, actually. Then there's association with devotees. Worship the deity. You got to go see the deity. You got to worship the deity. Right? Hear Srimad Bhagavatam. You have to hear Srimad Bhagavatam. Otherwise, you'll go crazy. And the 5th is, crazy. You'll go insane. If you don't read the Bhagavatam, you'll go insane. And that's why most people in the world are insane. If you tune into any place in the world and you watch, and it's like, these people are insane. It's not their fault. It's our fault because we haven't given them a Bhagavatam yet. That's our job, to make sure the world doesn't go insane. It's already insane, to make sure, bring it back to sanity. And the 5th is to live in a holy place. We have to feel what it's like. It reinforces our sense that, no, we're in the majority. We're not lost. We're in some wasteland where people are going to a football game on Sunday. And I saw this morning, I went out for an early walk, and I saw people coming for their morning program to the 49er game. And so they had the radios going, coming out of their houses, already listening to the chatter, and they had their shirts on, their favorite player, everything, and I felt bad. It's not a very pleasant program. What to speak if they lose? So the basics are there. And it's helpful to note down what one's basics are, because there are millions of other duties that will pop up in our lives that vie for our attention, right? We have so many obligations. And I've always found it's helpful to categorize them, or first catalog them and then put them in order of priority. That's one thing human beings can do quite readily, is figure out all the things they're doing and then say, what are the most important things? And a devotee is somebody who, if you look at their priority list, you'll see at the very top, what do you see? Stay alive. And then it's chant Hare Krishna. That's one of the top, that is the top thing, chant Hare Krishna. And if you're thinking about what's the goal of my life, what's the priority, it's remember Krishna at the time of death. That puts everything in a different perspective, doesn't it? All the various problems that come up, if we see it, it's like, okay, I'm working towards the last moment when I can remember Krishna. Can I remember him now? When someone just said something to me and I thought, well, how are you going to do it now? And in any discipline, as you've heard me say ad nauseum, the basics are what win. If you're in music, you have to practice the basics, right? Over and over again until you can't make a mistake. It's impossible to. So that's one of the benefits of having our shastras. Lord Chaitanya lines them up for us and says, here are the top priorities. If you stick to these on a regular basis and you do them consistently, consistency is king. And what goes with this? That's right. Prabhupada used to make this motion, and he had this saying, and we'll just make it a mantra for everybody. Drops a day, wear the stone away. And this is also a helpful idea, because I may think, well, but I'm so fallen, or I'm so overwhelmed, or I'm so unqualified. What good is my little practice going to do today? My insignificant practice? Well, the answer is, it's going to do a lot. And if you do your might, do what you can every day and make it consistent, rather than worrying about what you're not doing, do what you can do right now. Then drops a day. We'll make it a mantra. Wear the stone away. You can remember, it's just a little drop. How significant is it? It's significant if you keep doing it, and you keep doing it every day. So the word consistency also comes from stand. It has the same word in it, just has con on the beginning. Consistency has to do with being able to stay at a particular level. I think there's more to it. Yeah, anyway, it comes from Sanskrit. Am I doing okay on time? No. My God. Okay. Oh, yeah. And regard. Okay, a couple more points. So first one is drops a day, wear stone away. Be consistent and just pick out what's most important to you and make sure you do that first. Make sure you complete it every day, no matter what. Fair enough? The second one is association. And for that, the mantra that I think of frequently is from the Bhagavad Gita 13:22. Karanam guna sangosya. So karana means the cause. Guna means modes. Sangha. Karanam guna sangosya means that the cause of the position you're in now is your association. That's good to know, right? So we can make arrangements. If you have a choice, and you have choice A, which is to associate with somebody of lower consciousness, means they're not interested in chanting Hare Krishna. And choice B, somebody that is interested in chanting Hare Krishna and likes to hear Bhagavatam, and that's mostly what's going to happen if you go over to see him. let's do a quick quiz. You choose A or B. Correct. So, karanam guna sangosya means that choose your association. You get to choose that. And that's going to determine, karanam, that's the cause of your situation in the world. And that's one of the main ways that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says to stay alive, is to choose your association wisely. And the third is find balance. Einstein said about balance, life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving. And Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita recommends yukta hara viharasya, yukta cheshtasya karmasu, yukta swapna babodasya yogo bhavati dukkhaha. Said, do everything in a balanced way. Don't be crazy. Don't sleep too much and don't sleep too little. Don't eat too much and don't eat too little. And he said also, don't recreate too much and also don't recreate too little. Means that find a way, keep body, mind, and spirit together very practically. That takes some work, and Prabhupada did it. He walked every day vigorously. He also got 2 massages a day, which he said was yoga for old people. And he was very careful about what he ate. So that's something important. If your body's not healthy, if you don't feel good, it's hard to stay steady. It's like, I can't do it. I'm sick right now. So important. Right, Omkar? He's here earning his doctorate in Ayurveda medicine. We'll talk to you afterwards. Okay, now we'll take a few reflections, questions, comments. In fact, you can say on any subject. Don't feel inhibited.
I really like this point on consistency. I was just reading in Chaitanya Charitamrita yesterday, the meeting of Rupa Goswāmī and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Śrīla Prabhupāda is explaining in a purport the science of empowerment. He's explaining that one becomes empowered by consistently engaging in pure devotional service. And then he goes on to explain the qualification of Rupa Goswāmī wasn't that great, materially speaking. He was, serving those who are engaged in so many bad habits. He was dealing with pounds and shillings constantly. But because he had a desire to serve, Mahaprabhu recognized that desire. And because he consistently pursued that mood of service, he eventually became empowered. So this point about consistency, I was just thinking in relationship to becoming empowered to actually spread Krishna consciousness.
Thank you very much. There's a saying that I like. You could pass it over to Nandamari. That a big shot is just a little shot who keeps on shooting. You may think it's not a big thing what I'm doing, but if you keep doing it, and this, you can look in history from people who are famous for anything. They just kept doing the right things, and they didn't stop. Yes.
Just this point on interpretation. There's a purport, I believe it's in the 8th canto. Śrīla Prabhupada says the difference between the material and the spiritual world is the consciousness of service. So, yeah, oftentimes in my discomfort or in whatever struggle that I'm facing, there can be a kind of demonization of the situation or of the world around me. But I was appreciating this point that I can choose to interpret everything as Krishna's mercy, everything is just medicine, healing me and making me better, and then respond according to that interpretation. So I very much appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a very wise thing to do. And as I said earlier, when you see somebody doing that, we have a high regard for such people. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Shaknoti haiva yashodhum praksharira vimokshanat kamo krododbhavam vegam sagyukta sasukinara. That if you're able to develop this power to observe situations in such a way that you don't react to them in detrimental ways, that you actually process them through the lens of how do I stay alive in Krishna consciousness? How would Krishna want me to react to the situation? Then he says that you'll be happy. you'll be a happy person. And if you give in to anger and lust, then your life really gets ruined. You can really destroy your life by giving in to lust and anger. Even one incident, and it's really hard to make a comeback. And that's another thing I should say, really hard to make a comeback. Everybody can make a comeback. If Ashvatthama can make a comeback, anybody can. And Ashvatthama is still hanging around. He's supposed to be the next Vyas in Satya Yuga. That's a big comeback. Just remember, if Ashvatthama can do it, it's like, hey, who's that? Ashvatthama. Yeah, right. No, you can always make a comeback. And Krishna says how to make a comeback in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Is Sapada Mulam Bhajata Priyasya Taktanya Bhavasya Hare Priyeshaha. Vikarma Yachchot Patitam Katanchit Dhunoti Sarvam Hridi Sanimishta. He says, remember I'm in your heart, and I know your level of sincerity. And if you stay consistent and you go on with your practice of devotional service, I'll make it all happen. I'll make everything right. Weird things happen in this world. Yes.
I really appreciated your point and emphasis on our only job, not our only job, one of our most important jobs is to accept the reality that Krishna is consistently trying to provide us mercy and to take it.
Yeah, you have to stop it. Switch lenses, right? Before the default lens comes into place and says, I'm going to be a victim. You want to say anything?
When we were driving here this morning, Prabhu and I were talking about association and, talking about making a comeback or having a fall down. And we were talking about how it's not like something happens and you just fall off a cliff, boom, like that. It's a gradual fade. So it's important to see the signs of a gradual fade in ourselves and with those that we have close association with. And as Prabhu mentioned, association is really important. So we have mentors and we can go to them and reveal our heart and get guidance that way. But we also have peers. And our peers are someone that we can open our hearts to and reveal our hearts and our innermost thoughts in confidence. And in my life, I've had experience of both, where my mentors have given me really good guidance and saved me in ways that I didn't even expect. And then I've had peers show me love and consistency, and that's really helped as well, the loving exchanges. Some of you have heard me tell this story before, but there was a time when my personal life was really turbulent, and I was really, really having a hard time. And I had stopped. I lived a few blocks from the temple, but I had stopped going. And a good friend, showed up at the door. It was Radhastami. I didn't go to the temple on Radhastami. And she showed up at the door, and she had Rukmini's garland and a plate of prasadam for me. That's all I needed. And it was such a loving exchange that it always stayed in my heart. I have a special heart place in my heart for her. And I don't know, if I had ignored that as a sign from Krishna and a loving exchange, I don't know what would have happened, but I'm grateful that I did. So it can come from anywhere, but just be aware of the signs and of the loving exchanges. Fear the fade. It's true. Fear the fade.
Okay, Sarvamangala. Come right back to you, Gopal.
I was also thinking about association. And I just thought it's so nice to associate with people who may be in the dark but are interested because it's so enlivening. And I always thought it's quite incredible that Krishna may give you the right words to say, and that's kind of very mystical, and so you feel like you're associating with Krishna as well when you take time out to speak with somebody who's looks like they're favorable.
Such a nice point. So that it maintains the vitality of the community when new people come in. We then stretch ourselves so they can understand. And not only do we experience what you're talking about, Sarvamangala Prabhu, just the sense of being an instrument, but we also see in them the wondrous nature of discovering Krishna consciousness, the layers diminishing, and then we experience vicariously the way we felt when we first came to Krishna consciousness, and that keeps the vitality. Go, Paul.
Hare Krishna. So, just in the point of interpretation, when we were flying here, we stopped at one airport, and I went to grab some hot water, and then the man's name behind the counter was Krishna. And so he said, yeah, you can just have it. And then I went to get on the airplane, and the stewardess' name was Maya. So I was just thinking, that's my problem. Krishna's here providing everything. I get on the plane with Maya.
You live a charmed life, Gopal Chandra. Anupam Prabhu? Am I missing anybody over here? Okay. 1, 2. Shweta Manjari's next.
I remember maybe 1 or 2 years ago in one of the early VDA productions meetings, I think it was either Mayank Prabhu or Rasasindra Prabhu asked this icebreaker question of what the name of our biography would be if we had to choose. And all of us had like these very lofty and like intense names. I think mine was like the Mercy Case or something. And then there was like Causeless Mercy. And then it got to you. And of course there's like this big build up, like what's Guru Maharaj's book's name going to be? And you said rice, dal, chapatis. a life lived in mastering the basics. And that always really stuck with me. Because, you know, in Krishna conscious, we have these huge, lofty goals in terms of pure devotional service. And it's nice to know that to actually get there, it comes down to very practical steps that we could take, making japa great again, being a sage page by page, and then through that we can actually attain our goals.
Right up, Manjari. I just wanted to add a little mango pickle.
Hare Krishna Gurudev, thank you for speaking on this topic. I think it's so relevant because we see the ideals in the Shastra and then we think about, oh, I don't live up to that. So this means that Krishna consciousness still is for me. And a very dear mentor of mine says, always see Krishna's magic in everything. And I think that's what this is, seeing Krishna's magic in our life. I had a quick question. It's somewhat related. You talk about living to be corrected. And I just wanted to know, how do I put Krishna's mercy and living to be corrected together? Because sometimes I feel that my false ego comes out in a way where I'm not doing good. Like I'm really trying, but it's not enough. And there's so many corrections. It's easy to get overwhelmed. So how do I take that in more of a positive light? And yeah.
That's how it helps if we have mentors, if we have people around us that we trust. And if we're in a situation where, for instance, you get criticized and you feel devastated by it, perhaps it could happen, then you can check in with your mentors and say, am I okay? Yeah, you're all right. What's the matter? You're fine. And that we have to constantly, we have to have input from people around us to tell us how we're doing, because the world's changing so much and our interpretation of it changes. And if we have those who are steady around us that we can check in with and ask them, how do I look? Am I okay? Then that helps. And it also helps to take a little time to process it. Don't come to an immediate conclusion of I live to be corrected, although that's a safe space to retreat to. I move into that space and I think, okay, I'm going to sit here for a while and wait to see it from a higher perspective so that I can not make this so dramatic in the second. Oftentimes I find there's situations that everyone gets into where it's overheated. In fact, Napoleon is said to have not opened his mail for 3 months because he found that 95% of the problems were solved by the time he opened it. And there's a way in which if you get on the early end of your emotion or somebody else's emotion, then you get the raw end of it. And it's an emergency and it's the end of the world. But if you're able to stand back a little bit and let the froth go down, like when something boils over, and you're like, wow, the whole thing's full. It's like, no, it's just bubbles are coming from it. There's only that much in the bottom. Then it helps to give a little time. And that's a safe space to say, I live to be corrected. So what's the correction? How is it going to come to me at this time? On the other hand, if I just react in the moment, and when it's raw and it's emotional, as Raja Bihari Prabhu taught me, there's this graph you can keep in your mind. If I could get a little tattoo. Where it's the more emotional I am, the less reasonable I am. It's always important. I remember that even if I'm typing something, am I emotional? A little bit. So like maybe just write it tomorrow, because the next day is like, yeah, it's not a big deal. Let it calm down, right? Prabhu, what were you going to say? Or are you just holding the mic? Please.
A couple of points about consistency and maybe one about comebacks. I had personal experience about the little drops of water in a one-to-one with Śrīla Prabhupāda when I was going on leaving to go on traveling Sankirtan from Vrindavan, and I went into his room as we were leaving to tell him what we were doing, and he was really interested. But I didn't have that much to say. So after I told him where we were going, what we were doing, I was just sitting there looking at him. He was on his little asana in the corner of the room. I was sitting on the floor. And all of a sudden he just said, he looked at me. Well, when I walked in, he was chanting his japa. And he just kept chanting his japa until I'd walked in and sat down. And then he kept chanting for a minute or two, and then he just looked at me and said, what do you want? So I said what I had to say, and then I had nothing more to say, and I was sitting there, so he started chanting his japa again for a minute or two, and then he looked at me, he said, just chant your rounds every day and everything will come. And then with his finger on the table, he said, just like little drops of water on a stone. And he went, drip, 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 and he rubbed the table. He said, soon a hole is coming. I swear there was water on that table. And then he pointed to his books behind him, and he said, just like these books. And he said, every day, little translating. Some days, hardly one sentence. Then he opened his eyes wide and pointed again and said, so many books are coming. So that little drops of water thing is so powerful.
And the comeback?
Well, there was one other little thing about consistency that I read about a famous violinist who was interviewed and was asked, how often do you practice? And he said, I practice every day. And he said, if I don't practice for a day and perform that night, I know it. He said, if I don't practice for 2 days and perform that night, he said, I know it, and all my friends know it. He said, if I do it 3 days straight, everybody knows it. So that was that. The comeback is, in the introduction to Krishna book, Śrīla Prabhupāda makes the statement that this whole world is like the battlefield of Kurukshetra. And then he uses, at other times, he uses the phrase, the relentless onslaught of the material energy. And in one of his very early writings, he uses the phrase, the pitiless intrigues of Maya. And that slow fade that Nirkula Prabhu was talking about is a part of the pitiless intrigues of Maya. Prabhupada used to say, in like a needle and out like a plow. So if you go through an experience like that, you have to, at some point, make a very heroic stand. You have to find your heroic nature. Prabhupada talks about that in the third canto of how the jiva is heroic and is the non-devotee is heroically struggling with the material energy to gratify their senses, whereas the devotee is struggling with their senses to use them in Krishna's service. And the non-devotee will be defeated, and eventually the devotee will be successful. But what I was reminded of when you were talking was that we have to remember at any moment we can die. And that's when the hero has to stand up. And in terms of the fade away and the slide away, quite often we hear say, oh, he'll be back when he hits rock bottom. But there's no rock bottom. The floor just keeps falling out from under your feet again and again and again. So at a certain point, you have to go back to the basics again and just go back up the slippery slope. And sometimes you have to do that very much on your own. But we shouldn't allow that to happen if we maintain the loving atmosphere in the community of devotees.
Which goes to the point, don't fail to do what you can do just because you can't do everything that you think you should be doing. And Krishna gives a very inspiring instruction to Uddhava when he says, Sve sve ācārya nishta saguna parikirtita. That it's a good quality in a devotee when he or she is able to act with according to his or her present capacity. I have a present capacity. This is what I can do. Don't fail to do something. You have to do something. You have to have that heroic stand in the moment. But don't then think, well, because it's not enough, or what I think is enough, then not do it. Because then the other point that you made, it's really hard. It's much harder to make a comeback than it is to just stay steady. Like in physical equilibrium, if you keep yourself healthy, it's much easier to stay healthy. And if you do fall sick, it's easier to come back too. But if you let yourself go, then there's a way in which you may not make it back because it's really difficult. And the same thing on the spiritual platform. Okay, we'll take one last. I just want to see if anybody on the side. Did I miss anybody? Yes, Mataji back there. Tech support. Yeah.
Hare Krishna, dear Guru Maharaja Guruma, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Śrīla Prabhupāda. I would like to mention two of my favorite verses from Bhagavad Gita. The reason why I would like to mention because those are related to our turbulent mind. And I know that if we can control our mind, then we can control everything. So it is mentioned Bhagavad Gita chapter 6 verse 34 when Arjuna says to Lord Krishna, Chanchalam hi mana Krishna pramathi balava dridham tasyaham nigraham manye vayoriva sudushkaram. He says that Krishna, this mind is so turbulent, stubborn and strong, and controlling this mind seems much more difficult than controlling the wind. Then Lord Krishna answers in verse 35, answering his question, he says, Asanshayam mahabaho mana durnigraham chalam abhyasen tu kaunteya vairagrena chagrihate. He says that there is no doubt about it that this mind is so turbulent, strong, and is not easy to control, but with practice and detachment it can be controlled. So the reason why I'm asking this, even though I know these things, I repeat over and over again every day in my life. After knowing this, why still I can't control my mind? We know that Arjuna asked, and we know that is by practice and detachment. And it mentioned that practice means when we practice more about chanting and hearing about Krishna and engaging our senses in Krishna's service, we automatically start detaching our mind from other material things. But after knowing also, sometimes it's almost impossible to do that because our mind is so much out of our control. So how should we do that?
Well, you're here right now, right?
Yes.
You're chanting Bhagavad Gita shlokas very nicely, expertly. They said, so your command of those verses and the realization you have very deep. They came to your mind, you put them together, and you're here in the Association of Devotees. You made an endeavor to come here, so just keep doing it. And if you do it again and again, it stacks up after a long time. And Devahuti had the same question. She said, it seems impossible. I love those statements. Like, this is impossible. And then she said, what should I do? And Kapila Dev said, just keep doing it. And Prabhupada said the same thing. Jayananda wrote Prabhupada a letter. Great soul. The only sainthood we have in ISKCON other than Prabhupada. Because Prabhupada was there and he said, saint, put his picture up, celebrate his disappearance day. Nobody else got that. Jayananda and Thākura. And he wrote to Prabhupada and said, this, that, impossible, what should I do? And Prabhupada said, I have no other formula. It's the same old thing, chant Hare Krishna. So that's what Kapila Dev said. Just keep doing it. Because he said you have to do it for a long time. So settle in for the long term. It's not something that happens overnight, just like on a fruit tree. I was looking at the persimmon tree in our neighbor's yard. It's right next to our fence. And I was seeing the persimmons come up again, and it takes a whole year to make that cycle. That's a long time. And so we also have to wait for the fruit patiently and just be consistent. And don't worry about where you are now. It's all going in. The medicine's potent. And just trust the process. And even if, as it says in the Bhagavatam, in the verse Gyani Pariyasa Mudapasya Namanta Eva, in the purport, there's a really nice line in there from the commentators. They say, if all you do in your life is maintain yourself so that you can go on hearing and chanting, your life is a success. Start with the basics, just keep doing them. So that brings us to the next program. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. David Vrata Prabhu had his hand up, but we're going to have to move on because it's 10:30, I think. And we have a play, so that's fun. And it's from our Russian troupe who's going to put on a play. So we're going to vacate our, play? And if we can have a little kirtan in between while they're setting up, at least that's my preference, it would be really nice. Hare Krishna. I'd like to acknowledge Śrīla Devi Dasi for her. I didn't even say what she did. I just said her name. She's constantly working behind the scenes to make sure that things work out. Shamalangi also, and many of the team members who are behind the scenes working constantly. I see from our home, Nirkula's on many of the Zoom calls, so I know I have a sense of how much they're churning behind the scenes and how much there is. It doesn't necessarily, we don't see all the details, but to put a program together takes constant work for many weeks. Thank you very much. Months.
We'll start tomorrow.
Thank you, Śrīla Devi Dasi, and thanks to your whole team. Hare Krishna.
Can I add one thing to that about the way you were the MC yesterday was masterful. You introduced everybody in such a warm and personal way, and you made a very nice comic situation for everyone as well. So it was just a delight. Thank you very much.